My mom chose her new family over me and kicked me out, forcing me to struggle and build my own path to success. Now that I've made it, she suddenly reappears, not to reconnect, but to demand that I pay for my siblings' college. After all these years of abandonment, does she really think she's entitled to my help? To put things into perspective, my mother had me when she was just 20 years old. She explained that my biological father never wanted kids and wasn't involved, so when she got pregnant after only a few months of dating, she gave him the choice to walk away, and he did. Because their breakup was so bitter, she decided not to ask for child support, and he never offered any money. It worked out conveniently for both of them. I was lucky to have my grandparents' constant support, which helped my mom finish school and get a job. As I was growing up, she dated a few different men, and when I was around 8, she started seeing Harry, a coworker. They dated for over 3 years before tying the knot. Although Harry and I weren't particularly close, we managed to coexist peacefully. For years into their marriage, when my mom became pregnant again, everyone was overjoyed, even me. In hindsight, I should have seen what was coming, but I was too busy believing that my mom would always be there for me. I hoped she wouldn't abandon me, especially after enduring so many hardships raising me on her own. After marrying Harry, my mom gradually pulled away from me, and we began drifting apart. I assumed it was just a phase that would improve during her pregnancy. I tried my best to be supportive, but it seemed every time I was around, she grew angrier. To avoid upsetting her further, I decided to give her space, yet apparently I wasn't inconspicuous enough. About 6 months after the birth of her twins, she and Harry sat me down for a serious talk. They told me they couldn't keep me in the house because they now had 2 children to care for, and though I had just turned 16 so they couldn't legally kick me out, the financial burden was too heavy for their modest income. They tried to convince me to stay, arguing that supporting 2 adults, 1 teenager, and 2 kids on 2 web engineers' salaries wasn't impossible. But it was clear, they wanted me gone. I really didn't want to leave, so I even offered to get a job if money was the problem. My mom, however, insisted on saving every resource for the kids she believed deserved it more. That was all it took for me to realize that I wasn't wanted. Their cold dismissal forced me to leave without even telling me where to go. It wasn't a legal eviction, but it felt just the same. With no other option, I went straight to my grandparents' house that day. They needed to be there for the twins, so despite being upset with my mom's actions, they didn't cut her off completely. At 16, I picked up a part-time job since I could no longer rely on my grandparents' limited finances, especially given their advancing age. When my mom and Harry visited them with the kids, I'd see them occasionally, but they rarely asked about me. They acted so formal, almost as if they were relieved not to have me around. It hurt to see my mom seem less agitated without me, yet I knew there was nothing I could do about it. When it was time for college, I ended up living with my grandparents because my mom still wasn't involved, and they weren't old or healthy enough to help me move into my dorm. My mom and Harry chose not to be there, preferring to save money for the twins' future. This forced me to take out a student loan, and fortunately, one of my uncles agreed to co-sign, as long as he wasn't held responsible for the costs. I worked through college to keep up with my payments and build a little financial cushion. Once I started college, my mom and I hardly spoke, and only my grandparents showed up at my graduation. Not even my mom bothered with a word of congratulations. After college, I began working and living on my own. The early years were tight financially. I was barely making enough to cover rent, utilities, groceries, and debt payments, all while trying to save for the future. In a word, I was living on a limited income. Thankfully, over time, things improved, and I gradually rose through the ranks at my organization despite having little support along the way. I'm proud of how far I've come and now find myself in a comfortable spot. Unexpectedly, my mom discovered I was earning well. Even though we hadn't spoken for years, by the time I was nearly 33, I had climbed to a senior management role at the same company where I started my career. I even received a major promotion about 4 months ago, which I kept under wraps, sharing it only with a few close friends. I made sure to thank my uncle for co-signing my loan during those difficult college days. He later met my mom and Harry at a family gathering and urged her to congratulate me, but she never reached out. Eventually, my mom found out about my promotion and recently showed up at my door with Harry, insisting on having a conversation with me. I should note that I haven't spoken to her since I started college. I blocked her on every platform and removed her from my life after graduation, convinced it was pointless to hope for change. She didn't seem bothered at all. In all honesty, I doubt she even noticed. Only my grandparents, who knew I preferred not to discuss her, stayed in contact and carefully avoided the subject. I wasn't in touch with my uncle either, so I remained unaware that my mom and Harry had been struggling financially for years until they came to my door and explained just how bad things had gotten, and the only reason I even let them in because I hoped they'd come to apologize. Instead, they started by mentioning that my uncle had told them about my promotion, that I was one of the youngest people to reach such a high spot at my company. Rather than congratulating me, they seemed shocked I hadn't shared the news. Ironically, I was surprised they expected me to update them at all, let alone deliver good news. They also complained that I'd shut them out, insisting it was because I believe they always put their own kids first. They argued that by now I should have accepted their shifted priorities without holding any resentment. They even claimed that, as a teenager, I should have supported their decisions instead of turning to my grandparents. I still can't understand why they assumed I'd agree with their plan to kick me out. They even tried to make me feel guilty for being upset about how they booted me out so they could spend time alone with their kids. That's how our reunion started after all these years. They went on to say how hard the past few years had been for them, not giving me a chance to share my side. They recounted how they had launched their own company, only to watch it fail and lose money. Now, with the twins nearing college age, they admitted they desperately needed cash. I realized immediately that their real reason for coming was for financial help. They didn't waste any time. They even tried to cushion the blow by suggesting that I could repay them by covering my siblings' college tuition, even though they had been angry that I hadn't contacted them despite my success. They made it seem like letting me pay for 2 children's education was a favor to me, which left me utterly shocked. I told them straight away that I wouldn't do it, and that it was insulting of them to think I could be forced into it. I got really angry and reminded them that they were the ones who forced me to work through college and pay for my own education because they chose to save for their real children, leaving me to fend for myself. I made it clear that they had no right to expect financial support from me now, especially since I had never questioned their decision to put the twins first. They no longer had any right to demand that I stay in touch, instead of trying to control me emotionally. I pointed out that they could have used that money for the twins' college bills if they really cared about saving resources for the kids they favored. I had nothing left to say, so I told them to leave. I felt foolish for ever inviting them in, thinking they might come to show genuine remorse for how they treated me. Instead, they grew irritated and tried to shift the blame. When I insisted they get out, they retorted that I wasn't blameless, I was too involved, overly emotional, and always quick to anger, even though I was just a teenager trying to hold our scattered family together. I couldn't believe they considered that a real issue. Then they had the nerve to claim I was no better than they were, saying that by refusing their request, I was forgetting all the years my mother raised me on my own. They insisted this was my chance to make up for everything, but that I was being rude and unappreciative. I thought it was absurd they would even bring that up. After all, as a child I had no choice but to depend on them. Besides, they weren't even trying to help me. They kicked me out as soon as they thought I was ready to handle life on my own. For the next 18 years, they completely ignored me. I was still stunned they expected me to help them now, as if I owed them something after everything that had happened. Things quickly became personal and ugly, and I finally threatened to call the police if they didn't leave my property. My mother then reminded me of all the sacrifices she made when I was little, supposedly to be a good mom. Before they finally left, after more arguments, she claimed that I'd been ungrateful. She said that at the one time she expected me to put others first, I instead painted her as the villain. Since then, I've been tormented by the question of whether I'm at fault. Am I expecting too much from my mother, or is she just deceiving me? I even posted on Reddit for some unbiased opinions, though I'm pretty convinced I'm right. Am I the asshole for refusing to pay for my half-siblings' college tuition just because my stepdad and arranged mother are facing financial problems? Even though my uncle had good intentions, I reminded him that what he did was wrong and unacceptable. His actions have clearly affected my situation. I wouldn't be in this mess if he hadn't shared my life details with my mother and given her my contact information without my permission. He apologized profusely, saying he had no idea about their financial issues or how my mother would react. He admitted that he had no business discussing my life with her, and that if we wanted to reconnect, we would have done it without his meddling. Since his heart was in the right place, I'm not cutting him out of my life. I would have been much angrier if his intentions had been different. He simply made a mistake. In fact, it was because of him that I was able to go to college in the first place. He was the only one willing to co-sign my loan. If you think about it, I might not be where I am today if it weren't for him. I made sure he knew that what he did wasn't okay. While I don't want to seem ungrateful, I'm not a pushover either. I believe I struck the right balance, and I won't hold it against him because I needed some kind of closure. I also talked about my mom's recent struggles with my grandparents. They believe I'm in the right and have promised to try persuading her to change her mind. They said they don't want to lose touch with their other grandchildren, which is why they still keep in contact with my mom. They understand the difficulties her family is facing, but they don't think it's fair to put all this burden on me. I have to say, I think their stance is pretty reasonable. First update, my mother has been busy reminding me of everything she did for me growing up. Ever since we last spoke, almost 9 days ago, she's been sending me emails every other day, making me feel like I owe her something. It's not like raising me alone was a favor. She was legally obligated to do that. I just can't see the point. She only cared when it was convenient for her. She and her spouse decided to kick me out as soon as I started causing them any trouble, all while claiming they needed to save money for the twins' future. Now that the twins are adults, I think they should stand on their own instead of spending time trying to guilt-trip me. Even though I had been ignoring her emails, I finally decided to reply a few days ago and explained everything I had written in my essay. As expected, she didn't take it well and called me ungrateful once again. I simply told her that name-calling wouldn't change the truth and that I no longer wanted any contact with her because she had been a bad mother. I blocked her email account, but she quickly made a new one just to keep bothering me, something she never bothered to do for me. I blocked her, and I'll keep doing it until she finally gets that I'm not here to carry her drama. Honestly, I'm relieved we're talking at last because I expect this conversation to end quickly, giving me the closure I desperately needed. I'd clung to the hope that maybe they'd changed, that they'd come by to congratulate me or make amends. I even invited them into my home that day, but talking with them made it clear they're incapable of feeling regret, guilt, or shame. That encounter only proved how selfish and manipulative they are, so I've completely let go of any chance to reconcile. Earlier today, my mom showed up at my workplace, the strangest thing she's ever done. Luckily, I wasn't working that day, so she left in a hurry without getting what she wanted. I was feeling under the weather and decided to take the day off, which turned out to be a blessing because she would have definitely caused a scene or made me look foolish if I'd been there. The receptionist called to tell me my mom had arrived, insisting on seeing me and refusing to leave even after being told I wasn't around. When they connected her to my phone, I told her firmly that I was at home, even though I was already nervous about her next move. I warned her that if she tried anything at my workplace, I'd sue her until she was too embarrassed to send her kids to college. I did my best to sound intimidating, and it worked. She agreed to leave immediately, provided I met her face to face. I reminded her that she couldn't afford a lawsuit right now and that she wasn't in a position to make demands. I also mentioned that my employer wouldn't hesitate to sue if things escalated, a very different scenario since they wouldn't be nearly as forgiving as I had been. She'd be better off leaving quietly. After that call, I didn't hear another word, so I assumed she left once the phone was returned to the receptionist. I simply can't risk another close call like that, so I've decided to talk to a lawyer about my options. While she hasn't directly threatened me, I'm not sure if this incident is enough for a restraining order, but I still plan to explore all my alternatives. I just hope this experience was unpleasant enough for her to back off. Now, given everything, I'm convinced we have grounds for a restraining order. I didn't even need to think about one when my mom showed up at my workplace last week. I managed to get her to leave then, but after this week's events, it seems necessary. A few days ago, she was waiting outside my door when I got home from work. I told her right away that I wasn't interested in arguing and that I'd call the police if she didn't leave. She lunged at me, knocking me down and sending my phone flying as I reached for it. Before I could dial 911, she started cursing and blamed me for every misfortune in her life while trying to beat me up. I was stunned by her wild behavior, but thanks to my regular workouts, and the fact that I'm much younger than her, I quickly overpowered her. Fortunately, all the commotion alerted my neighbors, who called the police. They even came over to help, restraining my mom until the officers arrived. I ended up filing charges, and when the police showed up, she was in serious trouble. I've also spoken with my attorney about getting a restraining order. I've heard that Harry has taken the kids and moved in with his parents, and I'm not sure if he plans on coming back soon. He confronted her about her behavior after helping her and told her she couldn't keep acting that way, and they even got into a fight, which just shows she's completely lost it. I think she can't handle that I'm doing well, but honestly, she's responsible for her own issues, and I won't feel sorry for her. I'll have that restraining order in place soon, and since I'm earning more, I've already started considering a move into a larger home. Now is the perfect time to explore other options because being tied to someone like her is nothing short of embarrassing. I really hope she gets the help she needs and learns how to behave normally. She's even been harsh with my grandparents, who've told me they no longer want anything to do with her. At the end of the day, the only person she can blame for everyone avoiding her is herself. After that tumultuous week, things finally began to shift. The restraining order was granted, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had reclaimed control over my life. The legal process had been a storm I never wanted to weather, but it forced a change that was long overdue. I spent the following months rebuilding, both emotionally and physically. I moved into a new, larger home where I could finally create a safe space free of chaos. My work flourished, and gradually, the weight of my past started to lift. I also began attending counseling sessions to sort through the residual anger and pain, and over time, I learned that sometimes distancing yourself from toxic relationships is the only path to healing. My attorney confirmed that while the legal proceedings were slow, they were making steady progress, and that gave me a sense of security. I kept hearing updates about Harry too. After the confrontation, he realized he needed to prioritize the children's well-being and his own mental health, which has led him to seek professional help as well. It wasn't an easy journey, and the scars of my mother's relentless behavior will always remain a part of my story. But I've come to understand that accepting these realities was the first step toward forgiveness, both of her and of myself. I no longer let her actions define me, and I've surrounded myself with people who value respect and kindness. In the end, I found that true resolution wasn't about forcing someone to change or seeking revenge, it was about taking care of my own life. I've built a future where I feel safe, empowered, and hopeful, a future where toxic influences have no place. And while I still wish my mother would get the help she needs, I know that my journey to healing is one I must walk alone. Thank you for following along with this deeply personal story. I hope it serves as a reminder that sometimes, making tough decisions is necessary to protect your well-being and to finally move forward. I'm over it. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more shocking real-life stories.